Hello and welcome to Module 3 in HLM 450 Lifestyle Medicine. So today, or this module, covers two chapters in the book, chapters 3 and chapter 4, on physical activity and on healthy eating. So a couple of things that are important for this as we go through these is similar to the last. There are some tools that are related specifically to the lifestyle medicine, to healthy eating chapter that are in the end of the book that you'll want to pay attention to. And I'll mention those as we get there. Probably two of the most important things to pay attention on these particular chapters is that it spends a lot of time talking about what guidelines we should be following to be as healthy as we are able to be. And these guidelines are put together by advisory committees and submitted to federal agencies for then disbursement to the general public. So the first one, the first chapter 3 anyway, that we're talking about today, covers the physical activity guidelines for Americans. There are some important points in there that we'll talk about or that you'll read about, but realize that these things are updated continually. So what you read about in the book today may not be something that is still the current thinking a few years from now. So hopefully what you'll be able to do is look to the source that I've provided in the book and then go back to that source later and get updates for yourself. So it's a moving target, and hopefully throughout your lifetime and your career you'll be able to stay up with what the current thinking is for physical activity and nutrition. The way the chapter is laid out, it first talks about definitions, and I think that's a good way to go to say, okay, what do we mean by physical activity? What do we mean by exercise, and so on. So at least we're on the same pages with that. Again, I'm looking through the book at the same time that I'm doing this, just so we're on the same page here. The second section talks about the health benefits of physical activity, and this is really for you to kind of be aware of just some highlighted pieces of why is it important to exercise. We know it is because it makes us feel better, and that's maybe the most important thing. But there are some health-related benefits, and it's good to be able to speak to those and to know those and translate those to other folks who may not know the benefits of exercise. So that's why they're listed out in bulleted statements there. An interesting point in here that I want to spend a little bit of time on, there's not a lot of writing on it, but it's about fitness versus fatness. And we are in the Western world very concerned with obesity. And we should be, because it is a culprit to a lot of health-related issues, a lot of quality of life-related issues. But it's an interesting piece that it's unique to the Western world or to the privileged, because folks who live in poverty are not necessarily have obesity as an issue. They have other health issues. So looking at why is it an issue, why is obesity an issue in the world that I live in, it's important to think about that from your own perspective. And the point of the putting this in here, as far as in the book, fitness versus fatness, is we are very obesophobic, is how I like to refer to it in the United States, and that we are almost afraid of becoming obese. And many people are, in fact, afraid of obesity. And so we put a lot of effort, a lot of money, spend a lot of time trying to combat it. It's a very complex issue, and that's why it is an issue, because there's a lot of factors that go into why our society has become so obese. But the point in this piece in the book is to say, if you had to weigh, I'm not going to use that. I was going to say if you have to weigh out the two, but if you have to consider the two, doing exercise, should I be concerned more about exercise, or should I be more concerned about my body weight. The literature is pretty clear on this, that it's more important for you to exercise, and the benefits of exercise outweigh the risks of being obese. And so the point in putting this in here is to say, okay, even if you are not at an ideal body weight, that exercise is going to be very good for you, even if you never lose a pound of weight. There are a lot of health benefits that are related to exercise. And in fact, it may be more important to exercise than to lose weight for a lot of people. So people who are obese should still be exercising, even if no weight is ever lost. There's a lot of gain to be had from that. And so it's interesting I wanted to first point that out in there. So there are a couple important pieces in here about putting an exercise program together, whether it's for yourself or for another person. And there are components to an exercise program that are listed in here. And then I'm not going to go through those individually because you can read that part. But those are some very fundamental topics that you should be able to be aware of when you're working with someone else on an exercise program. There's the chapter or the section that follows that is on writing an exercise prescription, and I want to talk about that, the language there just for a minute. Prescription we're familiar with medications when we go to the doctor and we're sick and we get a prescription. The same thing can be thought of for exercise, but I want to challenge you to think about it in a different way. As we've talked about throughout the Healthy Lifestyle Management Program, working with another person to help them be where they want or need or should be regarding their lifestyle and life behaviors involves a relationship. It's about relational care, as we like to say. It's not a transaction. It's not transactional care. The word prescription, whether it's used with medications or exercise, can have that connotation. So I want to be very careful in the way we use exercise prescription because it works negatively for us in a couple of ways. One, and what I just mentioned, that it brings the feeling of a transaction. I'm going to tell you what kind of exercise you should do. Go away and do it, and it's your responsibility from there on. That's the transaction. That's really not what we're about in healthy lifestyle management and not what lifestyle medicine should be about. So perhaps in the book the language should be changed, but it is what it is at the moment. But I would like to challenge you to think about it differently. The second reason it's not as appropriate as probably what it should be, the term exercise prescription, is that it gives the notion that the way the program was written today and handed over to the individual is, by saying it's a prescription, means that it's set in stone. This is what you should be doing. If you just follow these set of instructions, then you're going to be great. You're going to be healthy again. You're going to be at the normal weight. You're going to be fit. You're going to be strong. You're going to be flexible, whatever it is. And we know that's just not the case. And it goes against the notion in the Healthy Lifestyle Management Program about tinkering. Tinkering, of course, is when you adjust and you modify, and you do it through time. And it's a little tweak here and it's a little tweak there, and that's the way an exercise program should be thought about. It's not handing over this piece of paper that has the greatest, best, end-all, be-all recommendations. So I want you to think about this a little differently than what the wording may be in here. And you can see, as you know, when I wrote this piece, the evolution of how this should be approached, even in my own mind, is being modified and being formed in this way of relational care with tinkering. And that's the way I would hope that you think about an exercise program with someone else. So it has the components that should be included in an exercise program. Again, you can certainly read through those, and those are important for you to understand and have some sort of handle on those, not only for a program for yourself, but if you're going to recommend exercise for other folks. These components are very important for you to have an understanding. Again, realize this is a basic knowledge of these components. And what this course wants to do is pull all of these together, all the lifestyle medicine components together, one being physical activity, other being nutrition, sleep, stress, alcohol, tobacco, and so on. So bringing them all together in an individual is what's most important, and realizing that this is introductory information here, and to go further in this if you so desire, and specializing in the exercise or physical activity component. So let's move on over to healthy eating, and I like the words healthy eating. I like the words physical activity as opposed to exercise, and I like healthy eating as opposed to nutrition, because it's a more practical way of thinking about what we do. We need to be more physically active as opposed to doing just purposeful exercise. We need to be more healthy in the way we go about food, as opposed to nutrition has the notion of being a natural science-based thought pattern: carbohydrates, fats, proteins, minerals, vitamins, water, those essential components which are great to understand, need to understand. They're in the chapter, but on a day-to-day practical basis, how do we go about eating? What's our strategy for approaching food? And that's what that's the thought by way of healthy eating chapter here. If you had to compare the two, healthy eating versus exercise, healthy eating is in my mind, significantly more complex than exercise or physical activity, because there are so many external social, cultural, environmental factors that affect the food that we eat, and the way we think about food, and the way we approach eating, and our ability to be successful with eating, that it makes just a very much more significant layer of complexity than with the physical activity. So by saying that, the chapter again is introductory. It doesn't cover everything that you need to know, and that's why we have other courses in the program that hit on eating, healthy eating, and hit on exercise as well, and physical activity. So much of the chapter, or a component of it, is dedicated to the dietary guidelines for Americans. Congress has mandated that there will be a new set of dietary guidelines every 5 years, and they go on the 5-year mark, so it's easy to keep track. 2010, which is in your book, was one set of guidelines, and 2015 was the updated set, and those just were released actually in January of 2016. And it's important to understand that, and we're not going to cover it because there's not time in this course, but that the guidelines, these dietary guidelines, are first drafted by an advisory committee of scientists, and based on the evidence that we have of the best possible evidence of nutrition. And historically, it's been mostly about the science of eating. But the 2015 guidelines from the advisory committee also added in what eating and the types of foods that we are eating, especially in the Western world, are doing to our environment. Specifically, looking at what does eating meat and beef do for our environment. And it's important to consider. Unfortunately, there's a bit of politics that goes into what is actually released to the public, and much of that language did not make it into the final draft that was released to the public. But you do have access there's an open access to the advisory committee's report, and I would encourage you to go out and look for that Dietary Guideline Advisory Committee report for the 2015 guidelines to see what it says in there, because they're a lot more comprehensive and a lot more specific than what the guidelines, unfortunately, that were released to the public. So the 2010 dietary guidelines that I have in the book are still good enough for you to be able to know this information at an introductory level. It's still about balancing calories. It's still about what not to eat and what to eat. The difficulty is, as it says in the guidelines of 2010, as well as it did in 2015, that it gives percentages for individuals to eat certain amounts of foods, like decrease your sugar percentage so that it only accounts for about 10% of your total calorie intake. Okay, that's what's in the 15 guidelines. That's well and great, but how many of us know how many calories we take in a day's time? And how do we know what 10% even is on a day-to-day when I'm eating, when I'm busy doing what I'm doing throughout my day? Can I be successful at keeping track of that? And that also was a recommendation from the advisory committee, but those as far as what foods to not eat specifically, so that we can make some headway at decreasing sugar intake, for instance. And those things didn't make it in, as opposed to, or in addition to, there were some specific recommendations about eating meat and meat-based foods, of decreasing those. And some of those made it in, but some of them didn't. So it's a challenge to be able to convey this information, and even in this class, because it is a topic of its own on the policy and politics of food. But I think for where we go in this class is still looking at these 2010 guidelines that are in here, still as being applicable and helpful for us to understand what nutrition guidelines are saying. But in addition, I would encourage you to go out and look at the 15 guidelines, and specifically, it'll be easier to find the 2015 guidelines. But I would do a little searching for the advisory committee's report on the 2015 guidelines, because that's where really the true guidelines will come from, or recommendations that we should follow come from. There is a lot of the chapter also talking about nutrition fundamentals, and these are important to understand. What does food mean as far as energy, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins? And then talking about other individual calorie needs. What does it mean for an individual? How much do we need to really eat in a day? And can we, in a practical way, figure that out without trying to count calories? And that's a challenge. And this is why in the book, what I have included are the application tools, the lifestyle medicine tools. We have the nutrition and physical activity diary, and then the hunger fullness scale. And those are the two tools that we've adopted in a practical sense to help people gauge the amount of food, and as well as the type of food, as far for the diary anyway, that we should be eating in a practical way. Nutrition is a challenge, to say the least, and we'll have hopefully good discussion about this in the discussion posts, and I would encourage you to challenge what you're reading, and challenge what you're hearing in everyday media, and what you're seeing when you go to the grocery store as is it the right way for us to move forward in improving our health, improving our environment by the way we're eating today. Good luck and I look forward to reading your posts in the discussion board. Just one by way of logistics, you should all hopefully be working on your paper, your term paper for the course. And so if you have any questions on that, just let me know. All right, we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks.